Next up, we will be having a panel discussion on how to unlock the potential of the defense sector for startups. And I will remind you that if there is a QR code here, you can scan it and you can ask questions. The discussion will be moderated by Kadri Tammai. She's the head of Technopole Startup Incubator, but she's also leading the launch of NATO Diana, a dual-use accelerator in Estonia. Let's welcome Kadri Tammai, Natalia Kusnereshka, Andy Hector, and Teep Kana on the stage. Applause.
I'll make a man and a woman. So please, dear panelists, take your seats. We are at the startup conference. The room is full of founders, investors. The pockets are full of money with empowering incubation, acceleration programs. But this is still the situation where an elephant sits in the room. No worries, sir. I wasn't pointing at you precisely. Indeed. It's huge. It tries to be inviting and attractive, but actually barely no one wants to play with it. The elephant is called the defense sector. If and how startups can engage with that sector that has seen a tremendous rise over the couple of past years is the topic that we are going to tackle right now. So let me introduce the panelists. He has over a decade practiced Japanese martial arts. He's an extremely proud father of a little princess. Besides that, he is also managing director of NATO Diana and warmly loved professor at Imperial College London. Innovative science, technology, research, and development are definitely his cups of tea. Therefore, he has consulted and lectured worldwide. Warm applause to Teep Kana. Brave is definitely her middle name, and I would say that it actually represents the whole nation. But she, with her team, with other brave people, has managed to put together a new Ukrainian tech cluster called Brave One. She and her team unite the defense tech ecosystem, scale it up, push it forward, and bring victory closer through tech innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, Natalia Kusnereshka. A small town boy raised up in Viljandi, like myself. Now he is one of the most known physicists in Estonia because he can explain difficult things in an extremely simple manner. This is the most valuable thing what a scientist can actually do. If you would like to know what Higgs boson is, then go and ask him, because he was working at CERN while this was discovered. Dear audience, Chief Strategy Officer and a co-founder of a deep tech company called G-Scan, Andy Hector. Teep, I already introduced this kind of like elephant metaphor. So if you don't mind, I would call you an elephant whisperer, basically bridging those two sectors together, the civilian sector, the tech sector, and the defense sector. So what kind of value Diana actually brings on the table for both sides, for the defense and for startups?
Thanks for the question. Elephant whisperer. Okay, you can add that to my bio next time then, okay? I'll take that. Look, I guess the core proposition of what we're trying to offer with Diana, and the reason actually personally I'm even interested in this whole domain, is that we and it came up in the panels that we just had, we have a lot of work to do to reimagine, I think, what actually is the principal goal in defense and security. We have very large-scale global challenges which we know that we cannot solve as individual states or collections of states. In fact, all of humanity has to come around to help to solve those problems. The pandemic gave us a very good example of that. Climate change is giving us another example of that. And at the same time, we juxtaposition that with the kind of regional conflict kind of defense issues that kind of typically characterize this space. So for us, we have to try and figure out how do we bring these seemingly competing kind of narratives and priorities together under a kind of single philosophy, right? And so one of the things, reason Diana exists and the reason we call it a dual-use fund or a dual-use initiative is because we think that science and technology needs to be brought to bear on a holistic defense mission, such that we are using science and technology as much as possible to lower the probabilities of conflict at source, to solve big societal problems which, if we don't address them, are going to lead to conflict later on. And in many cases, that same science and technology can also be used for our short-term, sort of tactical, if you like, defense issues in a manner that makes them less impactful than they currently are, right? So we know that we're going to end up in war situations, to be blunt, in the medium to short to medium term. But those interactions have to be made more efficient, less impactful, and there must be quicker returns to peace. And so Diana's dual-use proposition is about funding the disruptive science and technology under a disruptive defense mission, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We are past the times where the innovation came from the governments. Now it comes mainly from the tech sector. At least this is definitely my point of view. You mentioned dual use. What that actually is? So can you explain a bit for the crowd?
Yeah, so I think you could probably Google dual use and end up with, I don't know, 20 different definitions. I'm trying to explain to you kind of what our working definition is, in that if we think about it as in terms of being able, if you think about warfare or risk or conflict as a risk, right? That risk is composed of the likelihood of something happening and the impact of that thing happening. We need technologies that address both the likelihood, bringing that likelihood down, and also reducing the impact. So the most succinct way of explaining it is that there's the dual use. And you might call that, in reducing the likelihood, you might say that those are civilian applications, those are applications for resilience, those are things outside of the normal defense conversation. But if you think about it mathematically, what you're doing is reducing the likelihood. And then the impact part of it is, once you're in conflict, how can we be better at that? How can we be more efficient at that? How can we be less damaging in that scenario? And also, how can we create the right circumstances where it becomes economically incentivized for us to stop the conflict? Because the truth of the matter, another massive elephant in the room, is that quite often those incentives for stopping are not as well aligned as we might think. And that's something that has to be addressed.
Natalia, you are basically tackling the same theme. So Brain One is inviting tech communities to test out their solutions, products, basically with the Ukrainian army. How such a collaboration would look like if someone from the audience would actually come and say, yeah, I would like to help?
Actually, we are here and we built Brave One project, like a unique defense tech cluster in Ukraine powered by government. And we launched it 1 month ago in Ukraine, in Kyiv. And we have Ministry of Digital Transformation, Ministry of Defense, General Staff, Ministry of Economy, Ministry for Strategical Industries, and Council for National Security and Defense Issues, like founders of this project, actually. And we understand now that when we are talking about technologies, and now in Ukraine, we have to focus on defense technologies because it's about our lives. It's about our people's lives. It's about what is going on tomorrow in an hour. For example, tonight, Ukraine was attacked again by 36 drones, Shaheds. And it happens now each night. And it's not about something about global. It's about our lives and how we have to detect, how we have counteract, how we have to damage the drones, and how we can keep lives of people actually, military people and civilian people who are just sleeping at their homes at night. And now in Ukraine, we understand that we, like Brave One initiative, we had to gather together everything about defense tech in Ukraine and just to give all the support and help to the teams. And very often it's just ordinary teams who have been working for technologies, for IT, for even not about dual use, about just civilian projects. But after full-scale invasion, a lot of these teams, they had to change their directions and focuses on the victory, focuses on defense, focuses on what we can do actually for our people, for our team. So that's why we just made it one entry point, one platform in Ukraine for Brave One, for all the developers working in defense tech, for the investors, for the accelerators, for the partnership, for any funds, for any cooperation that might need about defense tech in Ukraine.
Okay, Heindi, you are basically a scientist now building a dual-use company, such type of a company that Deep and Natalia probably are looking for. In my case, one of the most annoying situations at the airports are going through the security controls. Due to the reason that it simply takes so much time and people are queuing up, you're going to solve the problem, right?
Sure. In long term, definitely. But it's also a very good example of the dual use, I would say, at our company. We started to build the security scanners and custom scanners and military scanners. But now we have two business lines. One is related to the security sector and defense sector, and another line, it's very interesting, is related to the construction industry. As in construction industry, we also need to scan bridges, to scan buildings, the critical constructions. If you have tunnels, for example, you have to find the weakest points and so on. And also it's kind of interesting how complicated is the world in this sense that we also, for example, military is very interested to how strong a bridge is. So if you have to carry around tanks or some heavy equipment, military equipment, also you have to know how stable is the bridge you are using. So it's I would say, as business, the dual use is a very complex issue, and especially typically dual use cases, they're also hardware companies and deep tech. So it's a combination of three very tough things. One is the deep tech side, one is the hardware side, and then of course typically there are B2G business. If you put all these together, it's
so basically the 3 times of valley of death.
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
Okay, quite a bad scenario. No one actually knows how many startups there are in Europe, but the approximate number is said to be something around 130,000 startups. I will start off with a slightly provocative question. Why should a startup sector take an interest working with the defense sector, which is perceived to be slow, with long sales cycles, with a lot of restrictions, very long go-to-market times? So they are having so many other possibilities instead. Deep, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's actually the response to that question is to stand up something like Diana and to stand up the NATO Innovation Fund, recognizing that there's an issue there, right? For many reasons, there's a lot of friction in the system. So even if, as a startup, and I've been advising startups for over a decade or so, I'm a scientist and technologist by training, and there are lots of opportunities for entrepreneurs, as you say, to sort of in the market to go and sort of look for a use case and then apply themselves. And if you look at defense, you've got the first barrier, which is around the perception of it, the vision statement. And then once you get over that barrier, you've got other issues, like how quickly will I be able to see revenue? How big is this market actually going to be for me? And all of these things have got a lot of uncertainty to them. And most good non-executive directors of a startup in that position would advise the startup not to go there. I've done it myself, I have to tell you. What we are able to do, though, with a dual-use proposition is, as I outlined earlier on, okay, we reimagine the vision of defense. Now, what we hope is, and by doing that, we overcome the first barrier, which is to attract people like this in this room to a reimagined what is defense actually all about. And we believe this is a proposition that people can get behind in a very different way to what has happened before. After that, having a fund and an accelerator and a venture capital fund, we're hoping to build an innovation engine, right? So that startups and entrepreneurs can see a clear pathway right the way through from grant funding through to venture capital. And by putting Diana and NIF into the market, if you like, we're hoping to create a gravitational pull for other entities, other venture capital, for example, to flock around this dual-use mission and create a thriving kind of economic environment within which startups have a lot of opportunity.
So you're basically trying to turn around that perception, take those obstacles away as much as possible, or?
Yes, 100%. And you know, the other thing is that if I'm saying to you that we are positively encouraging a dual-use proposition, that means that if your very first sales come in the health sector or in the transport sector, because procurement timescales in defense maybe are too long, this helps to smooth out the risk of you developing a technology which might eventually then end up inside the formal defense sector. Without that support, you may well just find that the startup falls off the edge of a cliff, because actually if they say we're a pure classical defense proposition and there's no procurement coming through, very, very quickly you starve a company out of revenue and further investment prospects. So there's a very important business mechanistic reason for going down the dual use as well as the vision statement. And those two things coupled together is Diana and the NATO Innovation Fund. And I think that's a very innovative, or we hope that's a very innovative proposition in the space. And it's the reason that we're here talking about it. And I'm hoping that people here are thinking, that sounds a little bit different.
The radars on. Natalia, the next one to you. The biggest problem for any defense or dual-use startup is not actually the lack of funding from the government, but sometimes the government itself with the long procurement cycles. Now with the Ukrainian tech cluster, Brave One, how you have managed or how you are trying to shorten those periods so in order the tech would actually be in an agile way where it needs to be?
You know, actually, I just want to add a few things about the, defense technologies and dual-use technologies. You're absolutely right, because before when we are not thinking about possibility that the next war will come, and now each of us understands that the only question is when it will come and where it will come. And each country, and all the Europe, all the world might be always ready for the next war. And now this war shows us that we have a lot of stocked products that are not at the stock points again. So we use that. And if we are talking again about technologies, we know that the First World War was artillery war, the Second World War was motor war, and this war is drone war. And we understand that technology is not about tomorrow, it's about today. And we understand and we know in our country how technology, they changes their flow of war. And we know that the quantity doesn't mean anything anymore. We are talking about technologies who makes the rule. So, and in Ukraine, we have that situation that we absolutely right, that procurement flows, documentations, long-term positions for their standardization and documentation, so on and so forth. But what we have in Ukraine today, that a lot of companies, a lot of developers, they're making their products not waiting for the state to help, to invest, to give them money, because each of us has their own families and friends on front line. And we are making just enormous fundraising and volunteering money to make the technology happen and to send it to the front lines. And we know that feedback that is very fast, and we know what is working, what is not working. And actually what is the situation now? That's finally, when this technology is approved already, tested at the front line, it comes to the Ministry of Defense flow, to the General general staff law. And now, actually, as one of the Brave One focuses is gather together in one place everything that is done already in Ukraine, and to show it systematically to the general staff, to the defense forces, so they know that we have already and that has been effectively used in Ukraine. And then we make like prioritization, and then we understand what we need today or what we have to make for other products to make them better, to make them more effective, actually. That is our steps. We are not living just waiting for somebody to tell the needs. We're just taking our phone. We're just having messages from our relatives, and we know this works, this not works. We have this need, we have that pain, we need that solution. And it's very fast to find the teams among Ukrainians, among all over the world, and we are just very thankful for all the support we receive from all over the world. Because I don't know how we would do that without your help and without your support in all the fields, all the sectors. So, but now we have to go on this war, because war is very tough in Ukraine, and it's not finished, and all the days, they're very tough. And we understand that we have to go on developing these products. So, and now, after that products already exportized by general staff, they go to MOD. But again, we understand that we need actually a very big amount of products now. And we have volunteers fund, we have fundraising, we have investments, we have grants, we have any occasions, any possibilities we can bring to our teams, we do it. And we do it right here and right now, without wasting any minute, because each minute is very important for us.
Andi, you are basically that one desired dual-use startups that me and Deep and Natalia are going after. Have you tried to dance with elephant, with the defense elephant? How has it been? Was it stepping on your toes, or was it a smooth process, or you are just figuring it out?
I would compare this, there are many elephants, so you're not dancing with one, but many heavy elephants, and you have to be very careful, otherwise you are...
a very good dancer.
Yeah, you have to be. But on the other hand, I can see some changes in this sector. As, let's say, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was hopeless, I would say, for startups. But now it's changing, as in many countries, there are special, how to say, innovation instruments. There are special foundations supporting early, let's say, early pilots. As typical trouble in this sector is that you have startup, you have recurring revenue in one side, and then you have to, the barrier is huge. So we have to drill some holes. And one way to go is to introduce special piloting instruments. And another way to go, we should think about this. There are some similarities between the, let's say, defense sector and health tech, as timeline in health tech is also very, very long. And, but they have solutions for that. There are more and more very complicated, let's say, health tech hardware in the hardware side, and they have solutions how to. And one way to go is, of course, special innovation support from the public sector. But also I can see in health sector changing also the mindset, in the mindset of the investors and so on. So,
in my mind, the mindset and the will of the sector definitely here in that region is there, definitely there. And I do see that Deep and Natalia basically are drilling those holes to shorten the time frame as well. Actually, Financial Times yesterday stated, and I will quote, European countries should bet bigger on a small number of key technologies. While hardware is important, we will never be able to outproduce US or China. However, being relatively smaller makes it easier for European militaries to digitally transform themselves. So Deep, how Diana can unite crème de la crème, tech-savvy Europeans and the oil producing power in US, for example?
Your question about the European perspective.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing is I think there was something that came up in the panel before. I just quickly want to pick up on something that was just discussed a second ago. The point you were making about agility, about pace, about testing, failure, and iteration. People in this room who make software will know what DevSecOps is. And you can think of Diana as being a DevSecOps proposition for defense. We want to be able to test, fail quickly, and iterate. We also want to bring stakeholders from government, industry, and academia together so that they can see this agility in action and hopefully move the dial with respect to acquisitions, pull through, use in the real world, all of that sort of stuff. On the European thing, I was listening to the panel previously, and okay, I'm in an interesting article by the FT, and I think it's true to say that there are some technology production domains within which it becomes difficult to compete with pre-existing, let's say, infrastructure, although not impossible, actually. I don't like thinking that those sort of things are impossible. I actually think we need to be just far, far more ambitious in the European domain around what we can do with cutting-edge technology, what we can drive forward. We have an enormous wealth of talent, of fundamental talent in our university sectors, developing right at the edge of all of the cutting-edge technologies that you can think about. We may not be the ones making the large-scale production at the end of the day, but then there are different ways in which you can participate in that entire ecosystem and that market. And so I think actually the real question is about ambition and recognizing the huge kind of latent potential that we have, and I'm not sure we do as well as we can in converting that potential.
From the article, I will pinpoint the focus part. So you should be focusing on something. This year, on what Diana is focusing on.
So the calls are actually going to be, you'll be hearing about the whole process in the next few weeks. So please keep track of our websites, check out the opportunities. They are literally going to be happening in the next few weeks. We are looking in the first instance in the pilot program, which is what this year will be, in sensors and detection in that domain. We're looking at the secure transfer and communication or transaction of information as another theme, and then we're looking at energy resilience. And so those three themes we think are very important in the dual use space, and we can attract people with good ideas to those spaces. And those themes will then change and develop as the years go on. So that will be our focus. But I'm hoping also that we will end up participating in other events and activities that look at other focus areas during this year as well. We're only focusing on those because you've got to pick some areas. We can't focus on everything. But that's not a signal to say that Europe as a whole shouldn't be thinking in a far more ambitious and broad sense. And so I would take issue of trying to design the scientific curriculum for any region of the world. Most of the time, I would hazard to say that some of those reports don't actually go and speak to the scientists about what they're doing. And our researchers in our research labs will tell you a very different story about what they're working on, how they collaborate, what they're driving forward than what you might read in the popular press.
Natalia, we have a lot of patriotic tech founders here in the room as well. So what are those technologies that Ukraine is missing the most? So where those people should be queuing up?
So actually, yes, we have this our Brave One initiative. We have that website, braveone.gov.ua. So it's possible just to message us, just to find us here. But absolutely right. Now we have very difficult situation, very tough situation in Ukraine. And it's not our choice to have testing ground in Ukraine. And it's not our choice, to make this work. But we understand that now, if we're talking about technologies, we're talking about defense technologies, and this is, as I've told already, it's like intelligence assessment, it's just electronic warfare, it's just detection, it's a big amount of different solutions we need, actually, and we're looking for and we're using. But as well, we have very big problem with the demining, with the humanitarian demining. That is also, we have very huge territories with demining problems. So actually, now we are very open and very grateful for any cooperation for any support, and we have really big possibilities for defense accelerations for the companies, for the partnerships, for the investors. I've told we are a new project in Ukraine, and we are just a project made for Ukrainian reality. And our main idea is just to be open to the world with the possible and wishes to go together with our expertise, with your expertise, with our knowledge, with your knowledge, so we can keep together moving. That is our main idea. Because, again, this war showed us that our main power is in cooperation, in being together, in going together. So some things, some processes, we don't know how they might work. But again, we are very open and very grateful to hear you. What do you need? How do you wish it? How you want it? And we know from our side that our one big dream for us is just to keep our people's lives and to win this victory as soon as it's possible.
Andy, I have already several times irritated with the elephant questions. So once again, you have been dancing with the governments, but another type of giants are industry primes. And they are rather hard to work with as well, because they have high ambitions, and usually if they do see something interesting, they basically want to swallow you up, have your IP, and no further growth and development for your startup. How do you see from the startup's perspective? So one part is working with the governments on the defense sector, the other with the industry primes. So what is the reasonable balance or reasonable terms from your point of view?
Both are very, very tough, and there are many similarities between the big, let's say, defense companies and governmental sector. As although the big defense companies, there are many people working there. It's decision making can be slow. But also what I can see now that in Europe they are changing. So the big companies, they are really thinking how to make the decision process quicker, how to react. Especially I can see this in, for example, in Germany, as they are investing much more money to the defense sector now. They have to change the culture, how to make decisions. Otherwise, they just can't use this money effectively. So I can see the changes. I can't say both sectors has own, let's say, there are similarities, but also there's some different sides. But it's as startup, it's definitely easier to approach the big companies, as the risk, the wish to take risks, it's much higher there than in the public sector.
We have just below 2 minutes left, so I will take a quick question from the audience. For Deep, this one goes, a practical question. What is the best way for an established quantum startup to start a dialogue with Diana?
Yeah, it's a good question, and as I said, we've got some focus areas this year, and many people in this audience will be saying, well, I work in a separate area, and how about having a dialogue with that? I happen to be in charge of a very special startup that is Diana. It's the first startup of Diana, and so we are building a series of engagement processes and a footprint for engagement, our mechanisms for engagement in the coming weeks and months, so please bear with us. I think the best thing you can do is to catch someone like me here in the margins if you can, so just come and collar me. There are also going to be mechanisms, and there is a mechanism already for registering interest on the Diana website, so please let us know who you are and go ahead and visit and register. Keep a track of what's going on over there. There'll be more and more opportunities to engage with us in the coming months and over the next 12 months.
And a very quick, another one for you from Paulo. Is there a deadline, time frame to engage in Diana NATO program? If yes, what is the date?
Well, as I said, in a few weeks' time, we'll be launching the first challenge programs. Respond to that. The deadlines will be on there with respect to how quickly you need to respond. With a proposal, we'll be looking to fund the first startups for the whole program by the end of this year, so the first cohort should be up and running. So that should give you a rough idea of timelines.
So dear startup founders, dear investors, there are a lot of new possibilities to actually invest in the defense sector, to actually give your input to the defense sector. Come and see whether this is something for you. As Deep mentioned, as other mentioned as well, it's a dual-use program if we are talking about Diana, so all the civilian startups are more than welcome. Thank you so much, dear panelists, for sharing the insights. And dear audience, definitely take an advantage. Go and grab them after we are going off the stage. Speak with Andi, Natalia, and Deep further on. Thank you, and it's a wrap up.
Thank you.
Well, one more time, thanks a lot for Kadri and all of the panelists.